Hey guys, welcome to another live show, another live She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And also let me know if you can see me and hear me and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, let me know if you can see me and hear me. Let's really get into it. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this stream. I'll stream for couple of like an hour, a little bit longer than that maybe. We won't run into the game obviously, but yeah. Let's see. Let's just make sure I have all the info, the most recent stuff coming up. Okay. So the comments now. So I haven't been on StreamYard for a little bit. Obviously you guys know that, but you can see the comments on the corner now. That's pretty cool. I like that little touch. So yeah, we can see your guys' comments like popping up on the side there. And yeah, I want to talk about, you know, some of the transfer rumors that's come out over the last like 48 hours or so. There's not too much, but I think there's enough to get a conversation going. And then obviously starting in 2 hours, the Europa League final of hell is going to take place. And it has started somewhat of a civil war in Arsenal sphere because some people, for different reasons, people want one team to win over the other. Personally, when it became pretty obvious that the two of them were going to end up in that final together, I was like, this is just shit, you know? And it's just so unfortunate that Arsenal have to go another season with no trophies. So the whole narrative over the last probably 2 weeks is it a better season? Is it a better season? Is it a better season? I mean, they are just rinsing and repeating it. But ultimately, when you haven't won anything and people are playing poorly, but they can always do the trophy jab on you. So, it is what it is. If we want that to change, then we need to go a couple of seasons with some fucking trophies, and then maybe we wouldn't have these conversations. But I've kind of flip-flopped back and forth on who I'd prefer to win or who I'd prefer to lose. I want to think about it that way. And what do I stand to gain from this scenario? Because it's all about what I will gain, not what I will lose. You got to change the way that we think about these things. We have to make it a positive. So at first I thought the best possible scenario would be if Tottenham lost and United won, because then it would continue their trophy drought into eternity, kind of thing. But then I thought the maximum banter scenario would be if United lost. If United lost, the maximum level of banter could be pushed upon them. And I feel like that's really important to me, is that I want to be able to go onto United Stand and the Football Terrace and United whatever the fuck and rants and all that, and see them absolutely lose their shit about the worst season that they've ever had in their history, where they finished near the relegation zone and couldn't even beat Spurs in a final of a second-tier European competition. So, yeah, I feel like, yeah. And when I think about this from like a perspective of like next season, I don't fear Spurs being in the Champions League more than I fear United. I think United can always leverage they've been able to sign big players outside of Champions League before. If they do get Champions League with a new manager and all that kind of stuff, they will feel like they can go out there and get targets. And one of those targets I do feel like they'll be able to convince is probably Victor Gyökeres, which is somebody that Arsenal are looking at. So if Manchester United were able to get Champions League, have a decent summer, sign a Gyökeres, sign Cunha, sign a couple other players, it could get long. It really doesn't take United a lot to start feeling themselves and to start frauding their way into shit. They can be as bad as we've ever seen them and they still win things. So what do you think it's going to be like when they improve even just ever so slightly? So whereas with Spuds, they win that, they don't use the money well, they keep Ange, and then they don't make Champions League next season. So I feel like I'm going to need a Tottenham win here. I'm feeling like for my mental health for next season and also for the maximum banter level, they must. And it's going to hurt either way. Let's be honest. Like, as an Arsenal fan, this is the worst case scenario that we can be in. We went trophyless. They're both in the final. Someone will win. And of course, the entire next couple of weeks is going to be about us. But I think I can stomach Tottenham winning and United having to eat that, So, yeah. Gunnar Shab says, I think the problem is Man United fans are always going to flaunt that they win trophies when they are in their banter era. But for Spurs fans, it will mean more, though. It will mean more for them. That's 100% sure. There's no real winning scenario. So, yeah, it's crazy. Troy says, I will not survive Tottenham winning a European trophy at all. Fair enough. Saida says, I'd rather Tottenham win. I don't care about the rivalry as much as most Arsenal fans do. Let's see. Redemption says, I 100% agree with you, Jess. It's just tough. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, it's not, there's no winning really scenario. So Sai says it has to be United, the way that there's zero chance of Spurs knocking us down in the Champions League next season. It's just, I think it really just, it depends on where you've been, where do you live? I think people that have Spurs fans in their family and come across Spurs fans often will want Spurs to lose this. Like, I can definitely see that. I know people like that. I don't know a single Spurs fan in my real life, so I know I can just switch off online, get off the app, and the noise will go away. It's not going to come into my normal life, where I actually know United fans and I really hate them, like, with everything in my being. So I feel like I need that, but no matter what, it's a lose-lose situation that we have to find a silver lining in, and that's how I choose to find my silver lining. um Antenna says, I feel like God is punishing Arsenal fans in general, having these two shitty teams play each other in the final. Josh says the whole situation is disgusting. Exactly. Abdilo says, do you think the club will spend more or Arteta will be under more pressure if Tottenham win? I honestly, I've had somebody ask me this, and well, if Tottenham win a European trophy before we do, will that put any pressure on Arteta? I'm going to be so honest with you guys. I don't really think Arsenal are going to change anything because Tottenham wins something. I really don't. I don't think they are not like other clubs. Other clubs, I do feel like, feel shame. They feel shame and they feel embarrassment when they've had bad seasons, and they take it personal, and then they deal with it by going out into the market and going big. They, like I said, they have shame. They have embarrassment. Arsenal don't have any shame or embarrassment. They change everything into a positive or progress or whatever. And so they will completely act like Tottenham hasn't done anything. And I don't think they'll change a damn thing. I really don't. Case in point, I think Real Madrid have been embarrassed differently this season. And when I say, like, for their standards, they've had a very embarrassing season. They got swept by their biggest rival. They were horrible in the Champions League by their standards. They've just had a really poor season, especially after, bringing in somebody like Mbappe. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Their immediate response to that was to go out into the market before the window has even opened and have pretty much secured 2 or 3 signings already. They are going to go big this summer. They want to push because it was embarrassing, and they don't make any excuses or try to make it seem like it was better than what it was. They know it was bad, so they have the shame and they have that embarrassment. We don't have that. Nothing will change if Tottenham wins a European Cup. They don't have shame. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys, because if they did, we wouldn't be where we are now, if they had any sort of shame, so I don't think they'll spend any more or any less, or anything will change if Tottenham win the Europa League. I also think because it's the Europa League, I really don't see it, because I get it's a European Cup, but when people say we don't have European history and we don't have any, European heritage, they're not saying that we've never won a Europa League. They're saying we never won a Champions League. So as much as I know people are going to use the Europa League as a stick to beat us with, it's really a second-tier European competition that no big team cares if they go out of. They don't care if they win it. It's not a thing. It's why most big teams, when they would drop into the Europa League, they wouldn't even win it. It was because they didn't give a fuck. They were just like, we're just going to go out of it. We don't care. And so I really don't think Spurs winning a second-tier European Cup is going to change anything for Arsenal. Now, that is a big achievement for them if they do win it. I'm not saying it's not a achievement, but from an Arsenal perspective, even if we had won the Europa League, in 20, whatever it was, 2019 or whatever the fuck it was nobody would say that we had European heritage. That it wouldn't be that. It would be, well, you've never won a Champions League, because that's what they really mean. Like, let's be honest. Everyone says the culture at the club is awful. Aha says, hey Jess, we had 2 consecutive title challenges, winning nothing, and we got the summer in January that we got this season. So yeah, I don't think anything will. I don't think it'll change for the club. I really don't. I don't see it. Josh says, I definitely think the fan base will have a change in mentality if Spurs win, because United winning is one thing, but Spurs, wow, we won't handle the trolling. Well, I mean, what do you mean by the fan base will change the mentality? Because I saw the thing that comes out from the Athletic at the end of every single season. You guys should go look at it, because the data from fans, Arsenal fans, very much so says that they feel like they're happy with Mikel and the direction and what we're doing. They're settled and they're fine. There's no discontent between the fans that I think maybe are match going fans. So, I mean, the online fan base, I think, is more split and a little bit more, the tide is turning a little bit more. But when it comes to the people that will actually make a difference, match going fans, they're content, so you know, I don't have any sort of like, I don't know, any sort of faith that anything will change, to be honest. Osanuga says Gyökeres, Xavi, Simmons, Gordon, or Rodrygo. Don't overcomplicate this window. Arsenal problems are easy to solve. 3-4 attackers, Garcia, and add a defender. I not need is not a need. It's a want. Imran says Chelsea potentially winning their 5th European trophy under 15 years makes me sick. Redemption says, what do you think are the chances we get Gyökeres if Man United win the final? Personally, I do think that if they win the final and they get Champions League, he will go there. I think just like Lisandro Martinez did in the past, even though he could have been an Arsenal player, he chose to go with Erik ten Hag. I think, Gyökeres is one things with Amorim. He'll know his system. Amorim is also playing wing backs and trying to play the system that they played there. It's probably a better fit for him, and if it really comes down to it, and the idea from Gyökeres is I'm really interested in going to Arsenal because they have Champions League, not because I want to play for Arsenal. It really wouldn't take much for him to switch over to Manchester United because it's just about the competition. And I kind of feel like that's what it is. Like Amorim did say in a press conference that he, if a player only wants to come to Manchester United because they have Champions League, then I don't want that player. And it was said that that player was Gyökeres. So, I think they've probably spoken about it. I think Gyökeres probably does want to play Champions League. He's been playing in Champions League the last couple of seasons, so he doesn't want to downgrade. And if Manchester United were able to get it, I do think he would go there. I think it would really limit our opportunity to get him, especially because the manager does not want Gyökeres from reports. Reports are saying, these are reports, people, so don't get upset. But the reports out there from multiple sources is saying that there is a split between Berta and Mikel. Mikel doesn't particularly like Gyökeres or doesn't want Gyökeres, or he prefers somebody else, and Berta really likes Gyökeres. So, and my feeling is that with a big game changer signing like the striker, something that we've needed for 2 seasons, if not way more than that, I don't think it will be something that the manager doesn't sign off on, or something that he's not 100% on board with. And so I don't really see a world where Berta is going to veto Mikel's vote for a striker. They're going to have a unanimous decision. And I think that's one that Berta will probably have to eat, is the striker. And Arteta, I feel like he's very adamant about getting certain players. If he doesn't get those players, then he doesn't use the players that he gets that he didn't want, So, yeah, it's tough. I don't see us getting Gyökeres if United really bear down and get him if they have Champions League, especially because Mikel is not super on board with him. Arteta is still dreaming about Isak, and if he doesn't get Isak, then he might want Sesko. But, we need to get a move on, because I did see reports yesterday about Liverpool being really interested in Sesko, so, and to be honest, if it's between us and them, I don't know, what he would choose. I know that Liverpool do tend to lose out on targets quite often, but I don't know, so if you want Sesko, just go fucking get him. But if they're waiting until the last game of the season to see whether or not Isak gets, Newcastle gets Champions League, so that they can try to fake get Isak without the money that's necessary and try to do some bullshit like they did with Caicedo or do some they'll just waste time. I really wish that they just give up on the Isak thing because it's not going to fucking happen and just go get the striker that we need and move on, but that's just me. Erwin says Arteta needs to take a back seat. The attackers he brought in haven't been pulling up trees, let's be honest. Nico says rather Watkins to Sesko. That's interesting. Troy says Isak is not coming. He should get over that. I just hate seeing the reports because it's like, we're not going to get Isak. Like, it's not fucking happening. I know that but if they don't get European, what do you think is going to happen? They don't have to sell. It's just like Real Madrid want, Saliba, and they're a step up from us, but we're saying no, so he's not going. So what the fuck do you think is going to happen with Isak? Do you think they're just going to say, yeah, Arsenal, yeah, of course, we are in Europa League and we're going to give you our best player because you want him? Like, no, it's not how it's going to go. So I really want us to just go get the striker and just call it a day. And we'll go over some of the reports around how Berta is operating in this window, and what's being said, and then the other targets that have come up over the last couple of days. Imran says, I'm a season ticket holder, North Bank. What are you doing? Thousands left before the laptop of honor and Arteta's speech. Well, good, because I was at the final game of the season where he gave the exact same speech when we beat Wolves on the final day of the season. And, I think there needs to be some sort of, visual thing that they can fucking see that shows them that people are not buying it anymore. I'm not saying that there haven't been improvements and that we're not in a decent position, but we have really stagnated this season. And it's really important for them to understand that this is not a forever journey. We need to start winning, so I'm glad that, people are at least, yeah, I think it's okay to show discontent. I think that the club tried to tell us how we should feel, and then there are fans that believe those same things and then try to make everybody else feel that way, that it's a journey. Arteta keeps banging on the point that anybody else would have been lower down in the table. And so it's an accomplishment and achievement to have got second with all of our injuries. But that removes the context around, going out of the cup sad and why we looked so bad against PSG. And, even before the injuries, why we looked a little, it takes away some of the context around. So does injuries mean you can't beat Everton at home? Does injuries mean you can't beat Crystal Palace at home? Does injuries mean you can't beat Bournemouth at home? But he has set the narrative as such, and the club wants us to all buy into that narrative. And a lot of people are buying into it, but then there's other people that I think for themselves and are not happy. And I think we should, I think Sophie said it better on the Highbury squad. I'm not saying it as good as she did, but the club tries to take away our ability to think for ourselves. And as fans, we should feel empowered to make our discontent known if we're not happy, so we shouldn't feel like we need to buy into the narrative of the process, and we've improved year on year. And, if second is an achievement and with all the injuries, like we should be able to think what we want to think, Nicholas says some Arsenal fans need to realize that the Arsenal board have learned from their mistake by sacking Wenger after he miraculously kept us in CL with players like Bettner. So they'll have to persist. John says a Rodrygo to Arsenal, here we go, will be the signing of a decade. We'll get into that as well. Just trying to wrap up some of the season type stuff. Osanuga says, didn't know Sophie was on smoke like that. To me, Sophie is one of the best Arsenal, content creators, in my opinion, because she says what she actually thinks. Like, she doesn't have any sort of preconceived narrative or any preconceived or anything that she's concocted in order to grow fast or, to be in a certain pocket. Like, she just says it how it is. And because she grew up in a different time as well, she understands that football at its core is a very simplistic thing. And I don't think she buys into a lot of the like things that we've kind of come to believe is how football should be. It's about winning, it's about entertainment. It's just about putting the ball in the back of the net, and things like that. So Sophie, I do think is a really good. She doesn't get as much I feel attention as she deserves, but she just doesn't buy the bullshit. And I love that because she's not necessarily negative either. Like she's not somebody that's going out of her way to be negative just for the sake of it. And she just says a lot of things that I personally believe, but I just don't know how to say it the way that she says it. She's so much more articulate than I am. But she just gets like every time I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. You can criticize and not be entirely happy with the direction that we're moving in and still fully be in support and back the club, you know? Sophie is Sophie Nicolau from the Highbury squad. She has her own podcast. She's on Sky Sports a lot. Like she's very well connected and has been in the game for a long, 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 long time. Ruach says, I'd rather hear balanced people than people who just think one way about things. In context with the season, Berta needs to look at the injuries we've gone through because they seem to be the same hamstring injuries. I think a new prevention physio is needed. Josh says, I honestly wish we could invest in our women's team because the fans that actually follow the women's team have actual standards. John says, what did you make of Calafiori's performance at left center back last game? So just kind of replying to some of these last couple of comments because they're really, really good. Regarding the physio thing and the injuries, I really do think that beyond just signings, there are other things that don't have anything to do with signings that I do think Arteta is struggling with that he kind of needs to fix because there's not the first time that we've seen it. And it's the running the same players into the ground. We have several players that have had spotless, fitness or injury records that are known to be physical beasts, like Declan and Havertz and Odegaard, these types of players, Saka, that have extraordinary fitness levels that seemingly Arteta has ran into the ground. I know that we've had injuries, but there's players in the shadows of the squad, and there's always players that are in the shadow of the squad that are pretty much iced out and we just don't see ever. And they could take, you take 20 minutes in 4 or 5 games from some of these players that play full 90s and you're taking full games off of their bodies, so I just think he needs to rotate a lot smarter. I think he does run the same kind of players into the ground. And he said before the season, they knew that some players would get injured because they hadn't done enough in the window and, they were on the edges of fitness anyway, because I think also coming off of the back of the Euros, they need to, one, let that core group of players sit on their ass, hearing that they want to do a double preseason where they do a mini preseason before they go on the full preseason in Asia sounds fucking dumb to me. Why are you doing a mini preseason? Let them sit on their ass and rest, please. They need to rest, period. Especially that core group that have, take Havertz and Declan out for just a second because they weren't Arsenal players, but Ben White, Odegaard, and Saka in particular have played 90 minutes almost every single game for Arsenal since they've been here. And Saka even maybe a little bit longer has played a lot of minutes because he was playing, under Emery as well for a little bit. So that right-hand side in particular, I think because it's so important to us, you've seen the breakdown of those 3 players, whether you like it or not, those 3 players have been fully ran into the ground, so now you have Timber who needs surgery. And so now he's going to have surgery. So then that's going to put more pressure on Ben again. And people are talking about, well, we should get a right back. And I'm just like, fucking shoot me in the head. Like we have 2 good right backs, but people want to bring in another one because Arteta's ran these 2 into the ground. Enough. He needs to rotate. He needs to figure out a way to rotate. He needs to, I don't know if it's the style of play as well that's hurting some of these players. Maybe having center backs running up and down the sideline doesn't help because their bodies are meant to be center backs, so maybe letting center backs play center back might help. I don't fucking know. But a lot of these guys need a rest. And there needs to be a full investigation on why we've had all these hamstring injuries. I know he said it's not just us, but all I really care about is us. I know that it's other teams have had hamstrings, but not to the extent that you've had them, buddy. Other teams have had hamstrings, but you've had like 5 in the squad this season, and they're all key players. You have now Saliba, you have Gabriel, you had Saka, you had Havertz, enough. You've had a shit ton. That's all I'm saying. Josh, getting to this comment like about the women's team actually having standards, there was a period of time where I was fighting for my life because I saw the way that people think for the men's team starting to seep into my women's team. And it has kind of infiltrated them a little bit as well. But I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that the women's team does not become the men's team, because you can see it. There's other teams that are creeping ahead of us. Chelsea is fully ahead of us now. And we are still up at the top kind of, but you can kind of see it, but you could see people trying to get that weird, it's okay not to win, the manager's dealing, it's fine. No, it's not good enough. Sack him. Sorry. I wanted Jonas gone. The moment that he didn't, first of all, we should never be in the qualifying rounds for the women. Just sidebar for those of you guys who don't know, if you finish third, you have to go into a qualification round early in the Champions League to qualify for it. It's a tournament style thing. And we went out of the Champions League qualification round, not even the group stage, the qualification round before the season even started, to Paris FC. And Paris FC is like going out to Girona, something like that, team like that, something like that. Team that's had some investment, but is not anywhere near as good as you. And I wanted him gone then. I was like, you have us out of the Champions League for the first time in a million years. And then he turned around and lost the first game of the season at the Emirates to Liverpool, a team that just came up. So I was like, surely we sack him. He didn't get sacked till the next season, which was this season, midway through the season. The women's team has had a little bit of that going on, but there's a couple of us that are like, over my dead body. Over my dead body. John, the Calafiori performance at left center back, it was great. I think Calafiori is a good player. And I think he just brings a level of intensity and aggressiveness when it comes to going forward that some of our players just don't have. And him and Kiwi, I thought, did really well together, but they did really well together in the Carabao Cup early in those rounds too. So it's not the first time that we've seen them play with each other. It's just the first time in a long time. And shock, surprise, they both look good in their natural positions. I know that Calafiori has played left back before, but playing left back in the Premier League is much different than playing left back in Serie A. And so I would like to see him stay there, and I would like to see, if Kiwior stays, for them to stay in the center back positions. I don't see a world where putting them at left back, it doesn't ever really feel super comfortable for either one of them. Calafiori probably a little bit more comfortable, but defending in those wide areas seems to be a big thing for him, so, and I don't know if it'll change necessarily. So yeah, but I think that puts you in a decent position to know that maybe you don't need to buy a center back this summer. Maybe if you do keep Kiwior and you have Calafiori playing center back, then you have 4 center backs. I know that idealistically you'd want another right-sided center back, but it fucking is what it is. It's not going to be perfect all the time. And if you do go out and get anything, maybe it would be a left back, but I'm tired of that shit. I'd rather just go with what we got. But I thought His passing was really good. Defensively, him and Kiwior worked really well together. I think where Gabriel and Saliba are a little bit of maybe the better physical pair. I think maybe Calafiori and Kiwi are the better ones on the ball. That doesn't mean that I want them to start over Gabriel or Saliba or anything like that, but I think they just have a little bit more in their passing bag, maybe. So, yeah, I liked his performance. I like Calafiori. I never sold my stocks. I didn't really understand why people were so conflating his level of talent with his inability to stay fit. I didn't think that that was fair. He needs to maintain fitness. He needs to not become Tomiyasu, but he's a really, really good player. And, you know, that is a backup center back partnership that a lot of people would love to have. So, yeah. Make sure you guys are keeping the comments going. This is pretty much just a chit chat. Like, you guys can just say whatever. We're just chatting. Mohammed says, hi, Jess. I think Arsenal transfer targets are already in place, and I don't think Arsenal will move from them, even if a better player becomes available. Rodrygo would love to be proven wrong. So in terms of the transfer targets and all that kind of stuff, over the last couple of days, I think I've seen Rodrygo, we've seen Anthony Gordon. We've seen, we're interested in Nico Williams. We've known that for a while. We've seen Ollie Watkins be up there. We've seen, Sesko and Gyökeres. And I think it was like Hand of Arsenal, who used to be Hand of Ozo, said, and he is in the know, so we don't know exactly what he knows, but he does seem to have a decent amount of, of information. He basically was saying that, the process is that, that Berta has spoken to a lot of players, and they basically want to have all their ducks in a row and have all the groundwork done and all that kind of stuff. And then when they come to a unanimous decision, they'll fire on a couple of the targets. So, and then the leaks come out, and the leaks are kind of just, what we've seen, like the odd link to Andre Santos, the odd link to Anthony Gordon, the odd link to João Pedro. They're all probably options to a certain extent. We just don't know how high on the list they are. So there's that. But I think I saw 4 players they want to bring in at least. I don't know what the spread is on that, though. When I think 4 players, I'm thinking Zubi is one of them, and then 3 more. Is one of those going to be a defender, and then only 2 are going to be attackers? Are we getting 3 attackers? And, and not doing the defender, like what is going to happen? So I'm not quite sure what the spread is on that. And I'm sure they have different options that in ways that they can go. But we've also seen Mbuemo as well come out as a target. So yeah, you guys know, if you guys haven't been here, welcome. But for those of you guys who have been here, you guys know I'm a lot less interested in what we do at goalkeeper and defense. I really couldn't give 2 shits about that. There are a lot of Arsenal fans out there that pretend like, if I'm saying that I'm not super interested in those things, that I don't know ball, because of course we need a goalkeeper and a defender. I'm like, we need them, but they're way less of a priority than the front. So if we miss out on anything, which every single summer we do miss out on something, if we miss out on anything, I prefer it to be the defender than the really important attacker that we need. That's just where I sit with it. We've spent a lot on defense, and I know that that's our best attribute right now. But whether we've had our first choice center backs or our first choice fullbacks or whatever, we've been the best defensive team over the last 2 seasons. So I don't necessarily feel like that's an area where we need to be looking to buy a super expensive left back or a super expensive center back. I think we should spend the least amount we possibly could spend in that area and focus almost everything up front. 2 or 3 attackers to me is absolutely necessary. I'd prefer 3. I'd be kind of happy if we got 2. A striker and a winger. But who those players are, I have no fucking idea. I have no clue what we're going to do. It's very much like all the leaks have come out and we just don't know who it is. Gittins, Leao, Williams, Rodrygo, Semenyo, João Pedro, and Gordon. Those are the names that I've seen. So it could be any one of those players, to be honest. And I'd love to know who you guys would prefer from striker position: Sesko, Gyökeres, Ekitike, and Ollie Watkins. So it could be any four of those ones. And then randomly Mbuemo, super fucking randomly Mbuemo. We've seen very light links to attacking midfielders. I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to get one. I think if they re-sign Thomas Partey, then they won't get any other midfielder. They'll just get Zubimendi. And unfortunately, Arteta is wedded to this idea of Havertz and Marino being options in midfield, which they're both technically midfielders, but neither one of them. I think we'd all rather see both of them further up, instead of in midfield. So it's a little underwhelming that the midfield seems to always be an afterthought, but it is what it is. I'd love to know what you guys think about that too, because as much as I love Declan, I really disdain the left 8 situation that he's in, where when he's up high, especially against the deeper blocks, I just don't think it works. He's such a good player that he makes it work, but ultimately, I don't think it works for us. But Arteta's pushing forward with that. He doesn't get any creativity from his fullbacks. He has 2 8s that are not necessarily the most creative, either, and then you have the DM. So I don't think we're going to get another midfielder. So maybe it's, defender, Zubi plus 2 attackers. But yeah, Rodrygo is the most interesting one, because I personally do think that he's a level raiser. I think he's the type of player you buy and then think about how you're going to utilize him, or the positioning and all that after. He's not necessarily a touchline winger, but the level of talent that we'd be getting is more important than him hugging the fucking touchline. Our wingers don't even look good when they hug the touchline, so I don't even really care about that. I just feel like it's a market opportunity, and we missed out on Kvaratskhelia. It's time to, we've had 2 market opportunities that did really well for us in Ozil and Alexis, and we just don't do enough of it. So I'd love for us to be flexible in this window. And if we can get Rodrygo, just get him. Don't ask questions, just get him first, ask questions later. I don't really understand what all the pushback is. I see people, he's just not. Personally, I don't want to hear about. I don't think that the scouts in Brazil for Real Madrid know less than the tacticos online that talk about Arsenal when it comes to talent. I think mostly from Rodrygo's perspective, it's not so much that he's not talented as that he can't get into the position that he's supposed to be playing, which is left wing. And it's Vinny's world and everybody's living in it. Mbappe can't even get in his natural position because he's a fucking left wing. That's Vinny's spot. So I don't think it's so much that he's not talented or he can't play for Real Madrid. He's been there for years. I just think he needs to be in a position where he can play his natural position. But yeah, I'm not trying to hear tacticos online talk about how he's not really that good and we should go for Semenyo instead. Sorry. No. No, sorry. I'm not hearing that. Any player, let's say 98% of the players that play for Real Madrid right now get into our team. 98% get into our team in some capacity. So, and Rodrygo's one of them. So I don't really want to hear it. I really don't understand what any sort of pushback would be from an Arsenal fan for Rodrygo. if you like Semenyo more and you prefer Semenyo, I really don't want to hear from you. Sorry. Neil says 70 million. They're quoting what a bloody steal. Social Join says a striker got to come in first or this window is a farce. Terrence Tibbs says last top player signed was Sanchez. Nah, don't agree with that. Nuances says we really should be buying players from South America directly. Terrence Tibbs says Abba wasn't a top star for us. I think he was. We don't need an attacker who doesn't have a position. We already have Havertz. He does have a position. It's left wing. The difference between Rodrygo, like you can all be you can have a couple of different left wings and they're all different. You know, I think people have a specific idea of what a left winger is. And it's you can be a more creative player, you know, more of a 10 and play on the wing. We see them all the time. Like it's not that deep, you know, but he's definitely a left winger. He has a position. He just can't get into his position because Vinny plays there. Like we all know that. Let's see. Pat says Abba was the star when he was here. Saida says if the club were serious, they try to sell Havertz, but then again, who would want to sign him for those wages? I mean, I don't even want to go there because, I mean, personally, I feel like there are a lot of disingenuous people in our fan base that are offering options or putting out opinions about players that we should bring in. And I'm like, I feel like you want those players to come in because you know that Havertz will still get playing time. The summer window that I'm looking at is a window that does not involve Havertz being a big part of the team from like from the beginning, you know, not as a starter, not somebody that, you know, he's not going to share time with that person. I want a clear upgrade. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I've never really come to the side of Havertz is much better than we thought he was, and he's a super important part of the team. I think he's important because we don't have a lot of quality up front. But if we had quality, he wouldn't get a minute, you know, but that's just me. I don't know. I just never came around to the mind frame that people are in where it's like, well, we need to figure out a way to keep him in the side. Why? Like, why? I don't get it. What's he done to y'all? You know, you know? Fortis Gunnar says Abba scored the winning goals in the semifinal and final that kept Arteta's job. Marco says Rodrygo's pace is not Nelly's, but his pace is really good. He's such an underrated player. Signing Rodrygo would be an earthquake, a real message to the league. I think the thing with Rodrygo is, you know, you would have to change how maybe you initially envisioned the winger prospect looking. We were looking at Nico Williams, some people Liao, Semenyo, this group. This group is different than Rodrygo, you know, so it would be kind of switching the script. It's just a matter of, do you think that his talent level is so good that you'd be willing to kind of forego what you originally wanted to get more talent? I'm always more interested in talent and make the talent work than getting a substandard level of talent because it fits my system, but because the system is not that good anyway. Like the system is like whatever, more talent and you're more likely to win the games that you need to versus having less talent in a system that kind of doesn't work anyway, you know? So, but I've always liked Rodrygo. So it's kind of like, this feels like a moment for us to actually really get somebody that would raise the level, but some people don't rate him as much, which I understand. And that's fine. Aha says our style of play needs a revamp. I agree. You know, if somebody is like perfect for the system, I'm kind of like, you know, Neil says the players that win football games will be what we talking about here. He says, Jess, if we get Rodrygo, we can't sign a rigid striker like Joker or Sesko. It's going to have to be an Isak, Watkins, Jesus, Havertz type or Mbuemo false nine system. Why do you say that? Why do you say that we have to, you know, we can't sign one of those strikers? I guess I'm not understanding why. It would have to be a false nine situation. I would love to know why you think that. Says, Jess, would you be fine if we went for a cheaper striker option, let's say Watkins instead of Sesko Gyökeres, if it meant that we could get Rodrygo in? I mean, the level raiser, you guys, I'm so scared. Like, I literally, this must be like a sign or an omen that something bad is about to happen to me because birds keep flying into my window and I don't know why. But I just heard it and it scared me. But the Sesko Gyökeres Watkins thingy, the level raiser from a striker position would be Isak. I think the level raiser from a winger situation would probably be Rodrygo. We need the level raiser. If we can't get it in both positions, the only one that's available to us is probably Rodrygo. So if there has to be a give and take, then it would have to be at striker. Now, let me be clear. I don't think that we should have to choose. I think when you have a window or when you have a window like we did last season, last summer, and you barely spend, I don't really want to hear about having to take a cheaper striker to get the winger. Cause I'm like, well, then why the fuck didn't we buy anything last summer? Because you could have bought Sesko for 50 million last summer. If that's the case, now he's more expensive. So, but you should have been able to save that money. I don't understand why there'd need to be a give and take. But with Arsenal, there always is. There's always something that you can't get or that you have to cheap out on. I would hate for it to be the striker because I feel like we need to go big in both positions. But if you can't get Isak and the only level raiser that's available to you that you can get is the winger, then I guess maybe I would be okay with getting the cheaper striker. It being Watkins absolutely kills me. Not because I don't rate him, but it's just like, damn, we've waited for a striker all this time and we got a 30-year-old Ollie Watkins is insane. But it's Arsenal. We can only get one good thing at a time. We can't have multiple good things at once. It's got to be one, So there's always something. Like Nuances says, there's always some nonsense we do in the transfer window. Neil says it's going to be Sesko on a cut price. Hopefully we can get them down on the fee. I feel like that would be the ideal scenario is like Sesko plus Rodrygo, because my line in the sand is if you get a younger project striker or somebody that needs more, just doesn't have the experience or needs a little bit of time, then the winger has to be somebody that steps straight in and bangs. It can't be somebody that also is raw and needs time to develop or whatever. So like an example would be the worst case scenario would be getting Sesko and Gittins, like both players are raw. On the first day of the season, Arteta is starting Martinelli and Kai Havertz because he doesn't trust those two to come straight into the team and make it work. But if you buy Rodrygo, there is no easing him in. He's going to start first game of the season. Does that make sense? So yeah. Isa says because I don't think Rodrygo is a touchline winger. I think he's best utilized with a striker that can interchange with him or a flying fullback like Davies. Okay, I hear that. I get that. If I had to choose between Ollie Watkins and Mbuemo, though, like in terms of getting like a cheaper kind of striker option, something, I would choose Mbuemo. I love Brian Mbuemo. Anybody that knows me knows that I watch Brentford because that Wissa and Mbuemo strike partnership is so fun to watch. And Mbuemo is a great player. Like, he's not going to be the most exotic thing that you can possibly get. Arsenal fans, we love more exotic players from different leagues and stuff. But you watch Mbuemo, he's super creative. He's a transition threat. He hits through the ball. He scores loads of goals. He plays at a good level. He's physical. I love him down. I would take him in a heartbeat for 50 million. I would love to get Mbuemo. I would prefer that than Ollie Watkins. And I like Ollie Watkins. It's just that cannot be our striker signing in 2025 outside of a January transfer window when we're really, really desperate. and I like Ollie Watkins. I really do. Just said, I love a striker, but I would spend this summer flooding the team with as much creativity as possible. Our chance creation is so bad. Problem is, I'm tired of watching Kai and Marino up front. Yeah, I mean, well, then you should want Rodrygo, because to me, Rodrygo is way more creative than any of the wingers that we've kind of been looking at. So yeah, that's what I would do, you know. Neil says, where you stand on Max Dowman being involved with preseason. We can't be relying on another kid. Yeah, I saw the clips and I was like, wow, he is really, really good. And that's about it. Like, I just don't feel like I really, as much as I would love to see him in the team next season, I don't want him to suffer the same fate as Ethan. I think Ethan started off like a house on fire and then dropped away just a little bit, and he dropped away just enough for Arsenal fans to start saying stupid shit about him. And so, as good as Max Dowman is, outside of a Carabao Cup appearance here and there, I just don't see him as needing to be a big part of the squad next season. I'd love for us to buy a player that would make it so that Arsenal didn't feel like they needed to bring him in. But I would love to see him in preseason. That's really nice. But him playing any sort of big role in the team feels a little far-fetched. Even watching him like in the clips, you can see that there's a lot of talent there, but it's very like still needs some rounding to it. Like, I don't know. It feels like I can sense Arsenal fans, the desperation to get this kid in because we lack talent up front. And so you want Ethan in, you want Max Dowman in, and it's Haaland, so it feels good. But we really should be putting more pressure on the club to buy the players that allow these players to develop at a normal rate and don't put too much pressure on them to be something that they're not. I want somebody that's going to push Marino and Kai Havertz out of this team. It's not going to be the kids from Haaland. We need to buy players that are going to push those two out of the team. That's the most important thing to me. And keeping those players from having too much pressure put on them. So that's kind of where I am with it. I really like those two players, but I'm just like, these are just clips from like under 17 World Cup games or whatever the fuck. Like, I can't take anything from this outside of he's just really talented, Victor says the Dowman hype needs to cool off for sure. He looks amazing, but I'd rather us get an actual player for that attacking mid role than a 15, 16-year-old. He looks a bit weak physically. Hector says Nwaneri just hasn't played. I don't understand why. I do think that this whole thing about Ethan not playing is, I don't want to call it disingenuous. I do feel like there were games where Ethan struggled with the physicality aspect of things, where he couldn't really hit the ball and run past somebody. He was getting shoved off the ball kind of easily, and he just looked a little bit under it physically, which is normal. Once people kind of settle in on what kind of player you are, they can adjust to do the thing that's going to keep you from being able to do what you want to do. And I think that fullbacks and defenders in the league decided, okay, we'll just put a body on him. He won't be able to handle it. And that's kind of what happened. So I'm not that surprised that Arteta didn't use him that much towards the end, because it looked like he was struggling physically. He's not like MLS. You look at MLS, like MLS just, he's physically he's physically big enough and knows how to use his body well enough to deal with first team men's football. I didn't feel the same about Ethan. So I'm not that surprised that he wasn't used towards the end. I do think Arteta was protecting him a little bit. But I know some people are like furious at it. And I don't, yeah. I think people were like, they were furious about it. Boy says, I don't think Dowman looks weak. That's lazy analysis. He just needs to develop more is all. He's almost there, but almost is not quite there. He may very well be ready by December, but cook him slow. Isa says, Mbuemo, Rodrygo, Zubimendi, new CM, party gone. MLS surprised me, to be honest. Didn't think he was that ready. Spit Rose says, get me Rodrygo. I remember Arsenal fans wanting Tielemans, Danilo, Mudryk. Arteta should have utilized him more 100%. Nwaneri has maxed out his agreed minutes. He's 17 and shouldn't have been pushed to start as much as he had done. Nothing to do with fitness. I don't know. Nwaneri got a grand total of 0 minutes in normal time, both PSG games when we needed goals in both games. John says, if we don't get Rodrygo, then Matoma is next best option. Let's see. Rock says, you lot will say Arteta burnt out Saka, but don't understand why Ethan has been given a break. Yeah, I'm lukewarm on the Nwaneri not getting the minutes. To be honest, I'm lukewarm on it. I'd prefer us to have like regular aged players in our team that can do the things that we need them to do, so we're not constantly harping on young players not getting minutes when it's clear that they were at the physical kind of break. I don't understand how people do not see that Ethan was struggling with the physicality, and we were on the edges in some of those games too. Like, I get that we were chasing the game against PSG and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they could have brought him in then, but he just wasn't the same as he was the previous couple of weeks. Felt like it was obvious. But that's just me. I'm lukewarm on it. I want us to have those players in the team. Come on, Jess, you're surprised that Arteta chose to play Sterling instead of Nwaneri. Shocking. I'm not surprised because he didn't really use Sterling either. I just think people are overreacting to it. I'll be really honest. Saida says Arteta has really brainwashed the majority of this fan base. Almost every quality player that can add something is looked at as not good enough for a system. The system isn't even successful. I think time has passed. Watkins going to Arsenal. Unfortunately, we'd be looking for a new striker the season after we signed him. Fair enough. Let's see. Mohammed says, what do you think of Shirky? I think he's really good, but we're not going to get a player like that. I'll be honest. Good player. We could use a player like that in the team. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not really about Arteta needing to utilize Ethan more and find a way to get Max Dowman in the team. We would not be so desperate to get those two in the team if we had actual attacking mids in the team that added creativity. He got rid of ESR. Basically, he got rid of ESR and Fabio Vieira, replaced those two with Havertz and Marino. Neither one of them are creative. Neither one of them create football. Neither one of them are high-touch players. Neither one of them can do anything really outside of play striker. And so I would prefer us to just get somebody in there that can do it than pretending like Ethan wasn't on the edges of physical crisis when Arteta stopped using him. It's just the same cycle every single time with this shit. I thought Ethan had some poor games, and and we weren't necessarily in a position where we could just give him minutes either. Like, we were in a stressful situation. We couldn't, I don't know. I'm lukewarm on it, guys. Sorry. John says, plus it's really hard to get minutes when Saka and Odegaard are your competition. There's some games where Ethan started and wasn't good and Martin came on and made the team balance. We saw the games because I remember coming on this platform when Ethan was having those bad games and people were saying Ethan was shit today. So I don't know, guys. It's not that deep to me. He actually got more minutes than I would have imagined him getting at the beginning of the season. So I'm kind of happy with the minutes that he got, but some people are really upset by it. I don't care. Boy says, is Nwaneri having a poor game more on him and more on the rest of the front line being absolutely woeful? I mean, no, he had some games where he gave up the ball like almost every time that he got it because he couldn't get past his defender. It's not, and I even said in those post-match videos too that it didn't change how I felt about Ethan at all. Like, I still think he's really, really good because I thought people were being harsh on him. But him having a poor game is not due to the rest of the front line being bad or the system or anything. It's just he's fucking young. Like, and he needs to get up to speed to play with grown-ups. Like, it's just not that deep. It's just not that deep, guys. Neil says, to me, if it's deep to you, fair enough. Neil says, sometimes the game passes Ethan by. Fortis says, our Arsenal stuck in a time loop with Arteta and his followers. Nico says, Odegaard has been shit for the whole season. I'm not having that. But the biggest difference between Ethan and Odegaard is that he can actually, even at his worst, he can still knit things together. He can still play in midfield. I remember there were times where Ethan would play in midfield and he would just get lost. I think that's why Arteta moved him up to right wing because he didn't have to deal with the duels. Unfortunately, in our midfield, it is a requirement to have to get into the mud. And Ethan didn't really he doesn't have that in his game. So I get what you're saying, that Odegaard was shit all season. He had a poor season, but even at his lowest, we could still keep everything together and still win games. I'm not quite sure that plugging Ethan into our team at that moment in midfield would have helped because it's not like he gets a free role. It's not like he gets to just run around and get on the ball in the pockets. He quite literally has to play in midfield. And that's tough for a player that's not up to the physical standard. That's all it really was, you know? Let's see. Victor says, Terrence, this is disingenuous. Lamal and Ethan are very different players. Oh, and seeing people actually compare Lamine Yamal and Ethan is, to me, one of the biggest examples of why everyone hates Arsenal fans. We are totally either delusional or disingenuous. We're either doing it on purpose or we're just deluded. Like, Lamine Yamal and Ethan are not on the same stratosphere. I hate to tell you. One is the best player in the world, and one is a young player still learning his trade. We don't need to put him under any sort of pressure or anything like that. But that's just me. Saida says Yamal is generational. I dislike the comparisons that Arsenal fans were spewing. Yamal is on another planet. Mohammed says Ethan was good to average cover for Saka, but lacks a lot in the middle. Anton Dunn says can't wait for MLS in midfield, but that would mean that we have to spend money on a left back. It's interesting because, again, as many problems as we have in our team, unfortunately, I feel like we have a lot of problems in the team. One of the bigger problems to me is that we've put a lot of resources into two players that don't solve any of our problems. And the only way to fix it is to spend more money. And I don't see Arsenal spending more money in those positions. Neither one of Havertz or Marino solve left center mid or striker. And neither one of them, to me, are players that I feel like, outside of like a small kind of like backup role, I'm not really trying to see them that often. And that's one thing I have to, take the L on. I thought Marino was going to be much better in midfield. And to be honest, I think he can kind of only play striker for us right now. He never really got a hold of the midfield position like I wanted him to. And I just find him and Havertz to be obstructive to what we're trying to do. One Xhaka would be better than the two of them in solving our problems. If you move MLS to that position, then you have to buy a left back. We shouldn't have to buy a left back. We should already have a left back. MLS should be playing in midfield because we should have the left back, but we don't because we bought poorly in those positions. So for me, left back, left center mid, and striker are positions that are causing us issues. And we have players that don't really solve those problems. We have, it's strange. You have Kivior and Calafiori that are kind of better at left back, but we're both bought for those positions. You're getting rid of Tierney and Zinchenko. You have a really good young player that could be really good for you at left center mid, but you got to play him left back. It's a lot of fuck up off of the back of not solving left center mid. You got Marino and Kai Havertz there, and I really don't want to see either one of them in big roles next season. I just don't feel like either one of them are giving us what we need. Like, is it so hard to go get a McAllister-like player? Is it so hard to go get a, just a fucking midfielder. Like, why does everybody have to be a box crasher? I don't get it. Nwaneri is good though. He doesn't have to be Lamal, but he is good. He has been ready to play for a while. He is very good. He is very good. It hurts. It, at least from an online perspective, I do think it hurts us a little bit when we compare our players to people that are just in a completely different stratosphere. Lamine Mall is just outrageous, Marco says, Jess, can you please do a poll who's better, Cava or Rodrygo? Sure. Let me do that right now. Make sure you guys are liking the video, subscribing to the channel. Go for another 45 minutes or so. Where is the poll? Where is the poll? Where is the poll? Here we go. You said Crava or Rodrygo. Can I also drop Leao in there, or no? I'll just leave it like this. Who's better? Okay, you guys can vote on the poll now. Saida says Crava is going to take the win because of recency bias. Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough when a player is kind of on the outskirts of a good team. It's tough, for Rodrygo, because he's, for the last like maybe 2 seasons or so, he's really just kind of been on the outskirts, a good player in their team, but somebody that maybe isn't quite hitting the heights that you want him to. So, but Kvaratskhelia is, title winner in Italy, playing for Napoli in a 2-man step with him and Osimhen for that season. And then he went on, was still good, and then went to PSG and was doing his thing there. So it's different. It's kind of like a different scenario. But I think Arsenal do well with players that they get that from the kind of like more elite sides that are on the outskirts of the team. I actually think those players do really well for us. I think like the Alexis signing for me is the perfect type of signing for Arsenal. We just didn't build around it. We just needed to get a couple more players on top of that. You had Ozil and Alexis and you just couldn't finish the job, because those two would have won us the league if they had a better striker with them and maybe a competent defender and a goalkeeper, So yeah, I like those type of signings, but I think when players are not the best player on their team, it's like, would you rather have the 3rd or 4th best attacker from Real Madrid, or do you want the best attacker from Brentford, or, one of the better attackers from Bournemouth? A lot of Arsenal fans would take the Brentford attacker over the Real Madrid one because of whatever the fuck. And I'd rather have the 4th best attacker at Real Madrid than the best attacker from Bournemouth. That's also a thing that should go for Rodrygo as well, is the fact that he's won Champions League and he played Champions League consistently. We don't have a lot of winners in our team, and we also don't have, and before people are like, but did he actually win it for them? I mean, you can go back to the game that they beat Manchester City when Manchester City thought that they were fully through, and Rodrygo scored those 2 goals, at the very end. So he did play a big role in it before somebody says something dumb. But having players that have been there, done that, won the t-shirt, and have played in elite setups and have done well, I think is important for Arsenal when we're trying to win. Bringing in more Brentford and Bournemouth and Brighton players is great, but I would rather have players that have a little bit of experience at the top level. So yeah, Wenger wanted to win. He protected the board. Saeed says, at Arsenal, Henry was our greatest player. At Barca, Henry was a decent squad player. Let's see. Saeed says, show the difference of levels. John says, Rodrygo has been the definition of remontada for Real Madrid for some time now. Seda says it's very similar to Benzema conversation. You don't know someone's true potential until they're the main guy star. Let's see. Taku says Yamal is ripping every fullback on the planet for fun, regardless of the league. Yamal would thrive. They were paying off the Emirates was the excuse that they used. Syed says Sanchez was the fourth best attacker at Barcelona. And Pat says Prem proven means a lot. I mean, what's more important to you guys, Prem proven or Champions League, or, more proven in the Champions League? I think a lot of people view Prem proven more important. So, I think there's like a little bit of a debate there. It would be difficult to maybe find somebody that's also is Prem proven and, maybe a Champions League winner and has won big trophies as well. But I do think, like Ruak said, like Champions League quality is something that, like, basically like the difference, but this is going to sound really shady and fucked up, but I'm going to say it anyway. The difference between getting Timber and Ben White. We got one of Brighton's best defenders, one of the best players, Premier League proven defender at Brighton. That was great, and it upgraded us, but you see the difference when you get somebody that's like a Champions League level or an elite player, kind of like in Europe. I think we need more Timbers than just players that have Premier League experience, especially if they've never really won the Premier League or they're not really in a Champions League team. But that's just kind of how I'm feeling, because we've kind of done Prem proven for a while. We have. We bought Ben White. We bought Ramsdale. We bought Raya. We brought Trossard. We bought some Premier League proven players. So, yeah, but that's just me. Josh says, I'm tired of this Prem proven nonsense. Havertz didn't prove anything in the Prem apart from he does not belong in the league. Nuance says Prem proven is Havertz, Willian, Sterling, etc. I'm tired of this nonsense. So yeah, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't find terrible players with Champions League experience and better players that are Prem proven. But yeah, does Prem proven also translate to the Champions League? Or do you think like Champions League experience would translate better to Prem? I think if you have a Champions League level player, I feel like it's more likely to be good in the Champions League, where just being good in the Prem doesn't necessarily mean you'll do good in Europe, but that's just me. Saida says, I don't necessarily care for Prem proven, especially for someone like Arsenal with a limited budget. We can't be overspending on players when you can scout and find better, similar. Josh says Prem players are overhyped and overpriced. Boy says, was Isak Prem proven before he went to Newcastle? Prem proven at a lower end players are worth the risk. Stuart says, honestly, think Ben White is a better player than people think. He'd been playing within himself due to injury for so long, people forget. I'm not even saying Ben White is a bad player. I actually love Ben. And I think he is, like, when I look at the two players between Timber and Ben, I think Ben is like, I would call him like a B plus, like a high B plus, like a very solid, dependable, high quality fullback for Arsenal. But when I look at Timber, I see an A, and I feel like that's the difference. Timber is just, to me, even if Ben White has the passing on him, you can look at a chart and see like, oh, Timber is better at defending. Timber is, better this way. White is better this way. I feel like if you had to do a score, I feel like Ben White would probably have like maybe one thing over Timber, which is his passing. But ultimately, to me, like, Timber just took us to a whole nother level, because I also think MLS has kind of done the same thing in comparison to Zinchenko. Like, Zinchenko gave us a certain level, but MLS just 10 times it. So, which is odd enough because we got him from Hale End. But yeah, I don't dislike Ben at all. I think Ben is a fantastic player. I wouldn't sell him. I love him to death. I think he's totally misunderstood. and he played with injury for a long time. But that being said, seeing his best and also seeing Timber's best, I just think Timber is another level. He gives us something in Europe against the best wingers that I just don't think Ben could ever give us. And that's just is what it is. Let's see. AMD says, what are your thoughts on Cala? Really good player, top talent, young player, needs time. Hopefully he can stay fit. That's the only thing really keeping him back. But I think he's a left-sided center back, and that's kind of it. And Arteta would do well to just keep him in the center back position. Him and Kivior, to be fair, if he decides to keep Kivior. Josh says, if Ben was in another league, he'd have cost 25, 35 million, but because Prem Taxi was 50, we need to look abroad and negotiate smarter. Blaze says, Timber is not bad player. Why some fans argue with that? He played with injury after had an ACL in last season. John says, Rodrygo coming along with Gyökeres would be fun to watch when Saka and Rodrygo interchange. Nico says, Jess, who do you prefer, Baliba or Wharton? Y'all are going to hate me because you guys always are saying nonsense, but I think Wharton is better. But they're totally different, and they could actually exist in a squad together. I think in a midfield that plays a 4-4-2, you could do Baliba and Wharton at the base in a regular free roaming 10, and you would have a very good base. But for me, when I look at midfielders, and this is actually one of the reasons why early on I really liked Thomas Partey before all the nonsense. Partey for me was never a physical player. I never thought that he was a destroyer. I thought that was very reductive and mostly based on the fact that he was of a certain hue, that people considered him a destroyer DM. He wasn't. What he was really good at was on the ball. His passing was excellent. So when I look at midfielders, I actually, some people prefer the Baliba type midfielders that are a little bit more robust and like to break things down and kind of like, bruise and carry the ball forward and all that kind of stuff. I actually like midfielders that are passers, so that's what I like, so I feel like Wharton passes my eye test better than Baliba, but that doesn't mean that I don't think Baliba is fantastic. I actually think both of them together in midfield would be really good. But go ahead and call me whatever you want to call me, because you guys always, you don't like any black players, blah, blah, blah. I do. I have been a Wharton fan for a while now. Yeah. John says Rice does the destroying, Partey does the physical, though. I don't think Partey is his best thing is his physicality. I'm not saying that he does not have any physicality, but especially when he first got here, to reduce him down to being a destroyer was disingenuous, because the thing that people liked about Partey the most was his passing. We never talk about him winning the ball back. That was never what we spoke about. We just talked about the passing between the lines and him dipping the shoulder and progressing the ball through the thirds. To me, he was never a destroyer. He was never a destroyer, ever. It was the passing between the lines. And that's what I like about Wharton. His passing range is just amazing, I think he eventually, obviously Wharton, he's English, he's going to end up being £100 million signing, but not for us, unfortunately. So there's that. Jordan says a lot of people downplaying Zubimendi. I think in a team that's going for a title, he will show his level. I'm excited to see him. I am as well. I think Zubimendi is actually a much better signing than what people are giving him credit for. Unfortunately, he's going to come into an environment where I don't think a lot of Arsenal fans, especially online, will give him a fair shake, because he's not the player that they want, or, they want, I saw it when Man City were linked to Wirtz for 5 seconds, and I was like, why the fuck are people fucking panicking? They're not going to get Wirtz. He's not going there. But they're getting Wirtz and Tijani Reinders, and we're getting Zubimendi. How about we don't make a false equivalence? Zubimendi is a DM, and we don't need to. It shouldn't be we should still get a DM. this season or this summer because we need to upgrade on Partey and Jorginho needed to go and, whatever. So it's not Zubimendi's fault that he's not an 8 or a 10, so let's not be dumb. But we should still be able to get an attacking mid, but we probably won't. But that doesn't mean we have to hate on Zubimendi. Zubimendi is a fantastic player. Liverpool wanted him, and I know a lot of us rate Liverpool's, recruitment. Xabi Alonso wanted him. He sure does know midfielders, So from my perspective, when I watch clips of Zubimendi, I see somebody that is going to help us move the ball quicker, faster, more concise and effective forward. For people that say he's not good at passing, he doesn't pass forward, please look at the stats. He has just as many forward passes and stuff as Thomas Partey. He's better in the air. He's the same defensive wise in terms of he's definitely not like a destroyer, but he's going to stop counterattacks and stuff like that. And he's been in a dead Sociedad team for this season. I mean, I think it's unfortunate. Sociedad completely flattened out this season. And he hasn't really, been able to keep them up on his own as I think people feel like he should have to. But he's a great player. I think he's going to be really good for us. I'm excited. It's just not the last thing when you're looking at our attack for multiple seasons is the last thing you want to hear is Arsenal going after a DM. But we do need this player. And he shouldn't be given shit because he's not Wirtz. He was never going to be Wirtz. He's not Wirtz, so calm down. Jordan says Partey is not physical. They just like to pin physicality on him because he's Black. The media always like to downplay the talent of Black African players, which was kind of what I was saying. I'm not a fan of the analysis on Partey being around him being some sort of physical beast or anything like that. That's not really his bag. His bag was on the ball, passing between the lines and dropping the shoulder and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that he was like a water lily either in midfield. It doesn't mean that he was just weak, but I did find that but the destroyer, I'm like, he's not a fucking destroyer. That's not what he's on. AMD said, for sure, we are bringing in another left back. I hope it's Nwaneri. I would love us to get Nwaneri, to be honest, but I don't think we will. And the reason why I feel like we won't is because the fee will be too big coming from Wolves. Can't see them selling him for anything less than 50 million. Prem team to Prem team. He's, a younger player too. He's not old. Wolves will be trying to get a decent fee. I know Man City are interested in him. That will kick up the fee quite a bit. So I could see him going Man City. But if we were to get a left back, that's the type of left back that I would feel like we should get. There's no point in getting another center back, used to be a center back, turn left back. Get somebody that's going to help us break down deep blocks. He'd be the perfect type of player to play in a game where we need to push everybody up and we're sitting at the halfway line and we need somebody to help us break down deep blocks. He'd be perfect for that, but I don't see us getting him. So yeah. DK says, I hope he goes to Man City so our wingers can cook him. Fair enough. The Arsenal perspective says, what about El Khanous from Leicester? I haven't heard anything about El Khanous since we were initially linked to him. So I don't know what's going on with that. That might have been if we are going to go for an attacking mid, this is going to be who we go for. So yeah, but for a little 22 million, he'd be a nice little pickup to make sure that we don't have to see Marino or Havertz playing in midfield. Sorry, I don't understand midfielders that don't have to get on the ball and make things happen. I do not understand it. It doesn't help my brain. My brain doesn't get it. And I think they don't produce any football. They're just there doing wall passes and shit. So, El Khanous is probably the most cost-effective and least risky type of attacking mid signing that you can make. It's way less risky than getting Fabio Vieira. He's Premier League proven. If you like that, he's young. So if it doesn't work out, you could sell. The fee is really low. So it's not like it's gonna gonna have to mortgage the house. It's a very no-brainer signing for somebody that looks like they could take the step to the next level, but it's not like pressure. Like if you spend 70, 80 million on Xavi Simons, there's instant pressure for him to be perfect and bang. So yeah. Travis says, I want Shirky. I just don't see us getting him. Pat says, entering the final phase of Arteta, win silverware this season or 86. Josh says, midfielders that don't get on the ball don't have to do them dirty like that. I don't get it. I don't get the idea of having a midfielder whose sole purpose is to just get into the box and do wall passes. I don't get it. I want to be able to pass the ball to my midfielder and then to be able to do an action and then another action and then another action. You know, we've grown up as Arsenal fans seeing an array of top quality midfielders. You know, everything from, Vieira, Petit, Cesc, Jack, Santi, Ozil, and then Arteta comes in and decides, nah, second striker, ghost Casper, left center mid, box crasher, and my fucking brain just cannot fathom it. I just don't get it. Yeah, even Clem. So yeah, I'm like, what? So yeah, Social Join says, I'm not sold on Zuby. Short legs, not sure his ground covering. Let's see what he's got. Alistair Ben says, I think we should be going for Eze. I'd love Eze. Again, another Premier League, if you care about that, Premier League proven player that can play left center mid, attacking mid type of player, can also go on the wing. I'd love an Eze. It's a easy, not as easy as El Canouche, but kind of like a no-brainer if you want to improve in that position. But I just don't think that we're going to get that type of player. You know what I mean? Blaze says, Jess, I have bad news. I saw rumors from John Cross that Havertz will play as a midfielder next season because he will buy a new striker. And this is what I'm saying about the Havertz and Marino situation that we have now. It's two players that are much better at 9 that will be playing minutes in midfield for Arsenal next season. And so our left center mid options for next season are going to be Havertz, Marino, and Rice. And Rice is the best out of the 3. And both of them two are meant to be in that position. That is what they were bought for. I know that Arteta said that we bought Rice to also play left center mid, but cut the bullshit. To me, those two players in particular are a little bit problematic in my mind because we spent quite a bit on them, probably more than we should have spent on either one of them. They were both overpriced. Neither of them solve any issue in either position that they play in. And the position that they'll be playing next season will be in the position that they're less good at. And Arteta will be forced to use them. And I think he wants to use them. So, because he did it. They're as far away from Xhaka as you could possibly get. So yeah. I don't know. Social Join says Havertz can hold bench and rotate up front, whoever the striker is. Josh says, oh Lord, the dreaded Kai in midfield experience. I know some people came to it and thought it was okay, but I don't really want a midfielder that doesn't midfield. So I don't know if I'll ever come to it and ever think it makes sense or it looks good. This whole, because we tried it with the Jesus thing where they played off of each other and he was like a second striker, and it's still just, it didn't fill me with any joy, but that might just be me. Maybe it's just a stylistic thing. I'm already now in the mode of who's next as manager. I'm not convinced we do anything at all next season. First time thinking that in years. Let's see. Just play Skelly in midfield for F's sake, Arteta. Rob says if Kai plays midfield and Arteta wants to play Zubimendi in the 6th, then what the hell kind of midfield is he planning on playing? But because Arteta did the thing early on when he bought Kai and did the diamond, and I thought it was fucking horrendous. It was a train wreck. It kind of it messed us up in the beginning of last season, which ended up being costly because we had to be perfect at the back end. You should never have to be perfect, and we damn near were, and we still didn't win the league. I don't really like the idea of one midfielder not having to midfield, and second strikers are to me just like a strange breed. The positionless group doesn't. It's not for me. So yeah, and whenever we played it, it never gave us goals. So I'm not sure, but I do think Kai will play midfield next season to some capacity because Arteta still, loves him and wants it to work and, has this idea in his head that, you know, he's going to be able to play the second striker and run off of the striker thing. But yeah, it's not for me, man. Dipster says Havertz will end Arteta if he plays him in midfield next season. He can't take this to the next club because even our best version of our midfield is not great. I think it works because you have good players that make it work. But I don't even think that Rice and Partey work together. I think with Partey on the island by himself and Rice so high up, there's always this like panic whenever we lose the ball because they bypass Rice so easily, and then Partey is on the island by himself, and he's not necessarily somebody that is going to be able to stop all those transitions. We saw that with Newcastle, and we've seen it a million times. So even his best version of his midfield right now doesn't necessarily work that well. So when you think about, okay, next season, like we could still be in a situation where that's our best kind of midfield and we just pop Zubimendi in there instead of Partey. But there are going to be times where you could potentially see Zubimendi, Havertz, and Odegaard, or Havertz, Rice, and Zubimendi. And I'm just like, nah, bruh. It doesn't work for me. But that's Arteta's stupid system. Tamina says Gyökeres is not joining United. He only wants Arsenal. Gyökeres joining Arsenal this summer. I think it all depends on whether or not Arteta will cave on the whole Gyökeres thing, which I'm not sure that he will. And whether or not United win this game tonight. If they win this game tonight, they will go for Gyökeres. He's their number one option. And I think the main difference between him wanting to go to us and go to them is Champions League. So if they have Champions League, then yeah. So yeah. Blaze says, yeah, I agree with you, Jess. Arteta will do anything to play Havertz in midfield next season. I just think he really likes this player. And also he needs it to work because he had to prove to people that it was the right signing and nobody thought he was the right signing. So he's going to persist with it. I am interested to see, ever since Havertz has been here, he's been a starter. And so if Arteta does buy a striker and he's not going to drop his captain and he's not going to drop his £100 million signing and he's finally got his prodigal son in Zubimendi, how does that look? Because it's going to be the first time that Havertz will be on the bench unless Arteta does something stupid and changes the system into some weird shit. John says, what about Calafiori and MLS positioning and MLS in midfield? My thing about MLS in midfield is I need to see it first from Arteta. I think once Arteta decides you're a certain type of player, you just continue to play there. And so I'm still not convinced that Arteta is going to pull the trigger and play MLS in midfield. Playing MLS in midfield, by the way, also throws into question the Havertz and Marino signings. And so if you put MLS in midfield and he kills it, which we know he will, then it'll look even worse that you have these two expensive kind of players that we bought. Havertz and Marino together is almost 100 million of left center mids that are not even first choice. Rice is better than them. MLS comes in, if he plays and he bangs, he's better than them in that position. And then you bought a striker. It just throws into question these two signings. I just think MLS will stay at left back. Yeah, MLS would be better in midfield, but Arteta is a spy, so he's not playing him, basically. And MLS will only play midfield in emergency, just like Arteta. And as much as I am not a big fan of Zinchenko in totality, I think when you get into the situation that we were in at a certain point this season where we just needed to make it shake, the fact that it took Arteta like until that moment to play Zinchenko in a dead rubber against PSV, and that's the only time we saw him in midfield in an Arsenal shirt, really, and he's a natural midfielder that can pass, that can create football, that can do the action, that can pick a lock. Yeah, it just shows that he's either more concerned about that system being what it is, or he's concerned about those players staying in those positions more than playing players that actually suit those better, so yeah. Millen says MLS is better 8 than Rice. Doesn't matter. Arteta doesn't see it that way. We signed Partey at about the same age. Thambella says, does it concern you just that Zubi will be turning 27 on February 26th? No. No, not at all. As a fan base, we really need to stop thinking that 26 is old. 27 is old. I've seen our fan base is like obsessed with youth. And I don't know where it came from, but like all of a sudden 26, 27 is now too old for players to come in. And there's an obsession with 20, 21, getting Max Dowman in. To me, we are like Zubi turns 27. He still has at least 4 years at the top level, at the least. That is long enough, He's probably going to sign a 5-year deal, So I don't really understand this aversion, and I'm not saying necessarily you in particular, but there's always a pushback on these players that are not children, and it's just, like there's nothing wrong with 27. And what halfway through next season he'll turn 27. To me, it doesn't matter. But I feel like we've gotten obsessed with youth, and I'm not quite sure where that's come from. We are in win now territory. John says CR7, Salah, Benzema, we're beast after 29. I just want to win. I don't care about the age. Let's win a few, then worry about buying younger players. Mohammed says Arteta idea really went south once Jesus decided not to be available. I think the idea was Jesus dropping into mid and Havertz going forward from mid chaos, as he said. How about instead of like focusing on chaos, let's focus on playing good football again. I liked Arteta better when he focused on us having great patterns of play, playing free-flowing football, letting players play in positions that suited them, getting overloads in midfield and letting people pass and move instead of trying to create chaos with Havertz and Jesus switching positions. Like, if that's what threw your whole plan into array, then fuck. I don't care about the chaos. I want us to play good football. And we saw multiple times us play that system with Havertz and Jesus swapping places, and we did it in big games, and they never scored. In both Aston Villa games, that's how we played. We played with Jesus and Havertz swapping positions, and we couldn't get a goal to save our lives. So let's try to just play like good football. Let's go back. We must. Some Arsenal fans are obsessed so much with young players, so they believe 26 or 27 years old is old. People forget that we signed Ian Wright and Carzola when they were 27, 28. Let's say dynamic instead of chaos. He wasn't bad in those Villa games, to be very honest. We wasn't bad. But it doesn't matter that we weren't bad because we're rarely really bad. Arsenal are rarely bad. Like, and when I say bad, I mean like diabolical. I've seen more bad games this season, but for the most part this season we were flat or blunt, but never really like terrible. But to me, at this stage, when we're trying to win things, having games that are important to us, like the Villa games, because one of them actually ended our title race last season, where we cannot score a goal, is bad for us. So, um, but we've also gotten to the stage where if we're not playing like we did under Emery at certain stages, or we're not playing as bad a football as, other teams that we talk about all the time, that as long as we have all the possession and we had the odd chance here and there, that it's fine. But we, you know, I think what happens is, like, it's kind of like when you're in the dark, you go into a dark room and you can't see anything, and then your eyes adjust and then you could start seeing things. I feel like that's where we've gotten to with Arteta and the project, and where we're at is our eyes have adjusted kind of to the bullshit. And so as long as we have possession and we have chances off of corners that we should have made, and whatever, or we scrape it, it's fine, because we weren't horrendous, but it's still not good enough for what we were meant to be doing. We are well off of, to me, especially this season, in terms of the way that we play, the way that we dominate, the way that we score goals, the individualism, X factor, all that kind of stuff. We are still a couple of steps behind Man City and Liverpool. And so if we're not there, I don't care that we had possession. I don't care that it kind of worked, but we missed a couple of, like we're kind of past that to me. Remy says 22-23 was better in terms of fluidity and patterns of play. The football wasn't stale, boring, and uninspired, and actually fun to watch. I would love Sesko. Pat Purser says Arteta needs to take all competitions more seriously. 88 miles per hour says 22-23 was a fire season. We need that energy. Yeah, I mean, I think I would love for him to just let go of the reins just a wee bit and go back to trying to play a better brand of football. I think most of the teams in the world that are good right now play a good brand of attacking football. I think Inter is one of those teams that's a little bit more fluid. They can get more defensive. They can take advantage of set pieces. They can play on transition. They can play with either 30% possession or 70. So they're still in that category. But you think of Inter, Barcelona, PSG, Man City, Liverpool, the better teams in the world, whether they were good this season or not, they play a good brand of attacking football. So anti-football has got to go. And I don't know if Arteta is trying to play anti-football on purpose, but he's definitely not playing good football. So yeah. But yeah, guys, we're going to go ahead and get going because the Europa League final from hell is starting in 10 minutes. Let me look at the poll. For you guys saying Crava versus Rodrygo. 52% actually say Rodrygo is better. And so 48% say that Crava is better. So actually it went Rodrygo's way, which is really, really nice. But yeah, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel on your way out. And we will definitely talk on the next one. I'll be on Judge Mo's channel tomorrow if you guys want to see in the morning, early 4 a.m. Or 4 p.m. Sorry, UK time. So I'll see you guys there. And if not, I'll just see you back on the channel. Love you guys. Talk to you guys in the next one.